year one, we can start with that. And we could always shift over to that 9% for a more long-term consistency basis, or we could do a half and half, do some of it out of the 80%, some of it out of the 90%. But I think ultimately at the end, we got to give something to people that are going to run a validator node. And maybe we call it validator node instead of coordinator. To me, that sounds a little better. I don't know. And Saphir, you're good at narratives and marketing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a better naming convention. Coordinator has a stink to it over the years.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone
But
oppose? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I can brainstorm on some other naming too.
Okay. Does anyone oppose changing the name from coordinator to something that's more community and distributed basis? Okay, let me write that down then. Percent. Does anyone have like an idea of a percentage wise? I mean, do we want to say, let's say, so we have 18% of the total supply for the first year for technical. I mean, we could take 2% of that, and kind of like what would our goal be? Like, let's say at the end of the year, we might want 10 people, 10 validators, but we're probably only going to get 5 in the beginning, right? So maybe we start with, whatever 1/10 of 2% of the total supply is for the first year.
To confirm, because we just talked about that remaining 9% that was earmarked for the IDO, are we going to be pulling from that portion, or are you looking at the technical supply here on this chart?
Yeah, I mean, if it was me, I would say out of the 9%. I know Bill Poster was saying maybe wait on that. Um, and I would say for me out of the 9% only because I would rather keep the technical supply because we're going to have a lot of work to do. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of documentation more than anything. Like hours and hours are going to be spent on creating documentation, GitHubs, and then we got to do a wiki and all that. And yes, a lot of that I think can be copied and pasted, I would think. Again, I'm not a technical guy, from the Shimmer side and even the Shimmer wiki. But then going through that and rewriting it specifically for Tan, I don't know. I would rather me personally use from the 9% and then have leftover from this technical 45% in year one, 18% of the total supply in year one, and we not need it, than to try to pull out of this for rewards. That's just my thought. Waiting for Bill Poster to type here. I think we should take it from the 80% and maybe use a 9% for incentivizing the community, like doing a staking, and use it for rewards. I think we have enough from the 800 million to use for the participator technical. Okay. What do you think, Saphir?
I'm kind of torn because of that 9%, we don't necessarily need the whole chunk just for one thing, right? There might be a nice middle ground here where we do get those community incentives that can come from it, like Bill Poster mentioned, but at the same time, we can still have a healthy chunk for that validator incentive network. Because in the first year especially is when we're going to see a lot of the growth, and that's probably going to be the most taxing as a percentage. And if we start pulling from the technical, when we do have all of these other things, I'm worried we might start getting a little short on runway when it comes to funding other initiatives as more dApp providers come online. So it's a long way of saying, I think we can split the 9% in a couple of different ways and then get a win-win for the community incentives plus the validator stuff.
Whoa. Okay. Bill Poster's saying an okay. Do you think 2% of total supply, so So out of that 9%, we take 2% to pay validators in first year.
First year, yeah. I'd lean towards, and I want to do the math on it to confirm, but I'd lean a little towards like 4 to 5% total, and then upwards of, yeah, when we break it out in the first year, a little heavier on that. But 2 in the first year seems generous, which is what we want to attract more validators.
Right. Well, would it be what 2% of 2 billion? Or sorry, 2% of 1 billion? It's a lot of zeros. So 20 million TAN tokens to be paid out to validators in the first year, which, just thinking off the top of my head really quick, I would think we would do on like either a monthly or daily basis. So let's say we had 5 validators in the first month. They're splitting whatever that monthly allocation is. And if all of a sudden by the 12th month we have 10 validators, they're splitting that monthly allocation. So of course, if you're a validator and you can be a validator, you kind of want to get in earlier because you're going to get a bigger chunk of the rewards, right? Kind of incentivize coming in earlier. Does that make sense? Sounds good. Okay, let me write this up real quick. Does anyone oppose this? I don't think this needs to go to a weekly vote. You know, again, we've always agreed that we can make these decisions within this meeting. I think, you know, the big question was how much of the total supply in year one incentives, et cetera, which we've did do those votes on, which I think was good. Now it's just kind of the granular, smaller micro decisions. So I'm not seeing anyone contest that. So, okay, so we agreed on, group agreed on 2% from the 9% to be used for validator rewards. And then group agrees on allocating 2% monthly evenly over 12 months. Any validators get to split those rewards amongst themselves. Okay, and that's something we can relay to the Epoch Zero team, DLT Green, etc. Anyone that wants to be a validator, any group that wants to be a validator. Another aspect is, and something, excuse me, Bill Poster is reaching out to those technical individuals, because what I always wanted to do was have like a community validator. I can't remember his name we were using, but he was great. He was a super honest guy. And he was running I mean, it was just a node, so it wasn't like a coordinator node, but it would be nice if there was a community member that could run a validator node, and then have some of us in these governance group that, again, have the password to that node, essentially creating a community node. So we, you know, generally I think what we'll end up seeing is projects running their own node, or running a validator node, because of course they have a project and they're, you know, hopefully making an income off that, and then they want to, of course, support the network that they're creating an income stream off of. But I think it's always good that, you know, we have a, depending how technical it is, you'd like, yeah, absolutely, Bill Poster. I mean, again, let's try to get the documentation, and then I think, you know, if we can find 1 or 2 or 3 individuals that could support running a community validator node, I think that would be super great, because then we can always use that node to, if I believe it's correct, you're essentially using that node to double check the other nodes, to make sure that, you know, when we're doing upgrades and stuff, that that everything's being maintained properly. What do we need to create the documentation and running the coordinator, the code from Garrett? I think that's it. Yeah, like TanglePay team is doing it. So we also, I believe, that documentation is going to be somewhere in the Shimmer wiki. So we need someone technical enough to be able to do some research, to find all that documentation, find the code, make sure it's correct. It might be outdated, and then pull it all into, again, the TAN GitHub. So this could be Jiggle, and maybe you reach out. Have you reached out to Jiggle yet, Bill Poster, at all? And if not, maybe reach out to him, ask him. All good. I'll also need to reach out to Garrett again. I believe he said he was going to try to get the Tangle Pay team connected with him. And that, I mean, Bill Poster, do you know command line interface at all? Or a bit? Ish. Okay. It might be enough. I know when I was seeing our community node, it was, using a hosting system, getting a CLI interface, and then doing all command lined. But it was, relatively pretty basic. So it might be good, and if that's good enough to have yourself and maybe someone else that can check stuff, and then we had a channel. Man, I can't remember. It was so long ago. There was like a channel where everyone running a validator was basically in a Discord group, and then would talk and help each other. And I think we just basically have a validator channel in here where all validators are talking to each other. So when they need to do a reset, when they need to do an upgrade, etc. They can all talk to each other. My experience just as a viewer in that group was documentation is key when it comes to code. Really clean, clear documentation is the number one thing, especially when we have a global community, different languages, etc. But clean, clear documentation. And man, I still remember, Edward, when you showed your documentation for what you were building was top notch. It was really outstanding. So I think we've got a good team to create really good documentation. And then I know from going to the conferences and talking to developers from, yeah, going to talking to different devs, that's one of the biggest thing they want is they just want to see really simple, good, clear documentation so that essentially they can get from, entering into this network, community, and building as fast as possible. And I know documentation, again, I don't think it was that it was poor documentation with the IF. It was just things were always changing so much that, we're talking hundreds of pages of documentation, and then everything changes, and, it was never really updated all at once and very parsed, etc. So yeah, so let's see if we have. So I'm gonna put Deep Sea to reach out to Garrett again to get Tangle Pay connected with Jiggle to set up GitHub documentation. Yeah, and then maybe ask Jiggle too if he's even gone through the Shimmer wiki. But yeah, might be something to reach out, Bill Poster, to see if there's any technical individuals that would like to create some a TAN wiki documentation based off of the Shimmer, for incentives, of course. Okay. 1051. I think that's pretty good. I think we've